Speaking of 50-year mortgages, you basically do not pay any of the primary ever if you're on a 50-year mortgage. This is the new thing to make houses affordable, is to make you pay more. Woe said if you take the 50-year loan at age 30, by the time you turn 50, you still owe, this is for a $500,000 mortgage, you would still owe $447,000. So after 20 years and paying $632,000, you still owe 90%, 95% of the principal. It's absolutely insane, man. Our first condo had mortgage interest rate at 10%. Once the economy improved and we were ready, we bought a home with a mortgage rate at 7%. We moved after 20 years and bought a house with a 5% mortgage. And Woe says, go back and add up how much interest you paid across all those loans for a single parcel. You got obliterated. Dude, my first loan that wasn't a student loan, which is also a scam, but it was a car loan. I needed to buy a car. I was 34 years old buying my first car, and it was a $9,000 Canadian car, which is about $6,500 American. And I took the loan and all that because I just needed the car to get to work. And then when I got home, I did the math and I was like, oh, this $9,000 car will cost me $17,000 by the time I pay it off on this 7-year term that I was on. I just worked my ass off and saved and paid it off 4 years early. I don't want a 50-year mortgage, dude. I don't own a house. I'm 45. I can pay off the mortgage when I'm, let me check my notes here, 95 years old. I'll have that all paid off when I'm 95. Andrew Torba says, it is one of the great ironies of modern history that the very regime we are taught to revile above all others achieved what our own leaders insist is impossible. While we are relentlessly instructed on the horrors of National Socialism, we are never told of its economic miracle, a revival so stunning it lifted a nation from the ashes of despair and turned it into an industrial leader within a handful of years. While our system plunges young men into lifelong debt for the chance at a home, the National Socialists offered marriage loans, slashed unemployment to zero, and prioritized the stability of the family as the core of national strength. They understood a fundamental truth our leaders deny, that an economy must serve its own people first. Me and Allison's house would be 50% paid off just by having 2 kids. We're coping. Is Groypergate destroying MAGA? Rufo and L0m3z discuss.
We are now a full week or more than a week into Fuentes Gate or Groyper Gate. This idiotic scandal where everyone on our side is not just taking the bait, but just 3-bedroom house is 1 bathroom, 3 bedrooms, small house, less than 1,000 square feet. And the guy wanted $1 million for it. But it's so crazy because it was the evaluation for it was $650,000. He's just I know what I got. It's all right, man, good luck with that. Eating the bait so passionately and not even realizing that they've been hooked.
But here we are talking about it.
And here we are talking about, we're taking the bait. We're taking the bait. We're maintaining strategic distance and an emotional coldness with this bait. We're looking at the bait. We're analyzing the bait, but we're not taking the bait. But for those of the people who are blessedly ignorant about what's happening, give us the basic rundown of this scandal in kind of the least inside baseball manner that you can.
Okay, the short of it is there's a streamer, Nick Fuentes, young guy. He is sort of nominally on the right. However, he sort of opposed Donald Trump and wanted to get his supporters to vote for Kamala. And, he wanted to make Kanye president. And he's been critical of J.D. Vance, critical of the Israel lobby in particular. And, he talks about the JQ, the Jewish question, et cetera. And this has provoked a lot of consternation and sort of emotional reaction from the conservative commentariat. And so there's this guy and he's got this stream and he's got these followers called Groypers. And then Tucker Carlson, everybody knows Tucker Carlson, a man who needs no introduction.
This is Jonathan Keeperman, a.k.a. L0m3z. He is the owner, I guess, of Passage Press, and basically like considered like a Bapsphere guy, but I really like have never like seen this guy say anything where I was like, what the fuck is this? Like I basically have everything I've seen from him I've agreed with. There is something about his hand gestures here that's a little bit, I'm not sure what it's. There's something like he's not super healthy looking or what. I'm not sure what it is, but there's something off-putting going on, and I hate to say that because I don't got anything against the guy.
And nonetheless, this has now created real world consequences. So the Heritage Foundation has been embroiled in this scandal. Kevin Roberts put out a video sort of explaining, I mean, maybe not in the most artful way, his position on this, which caused more backlash. And now people are threatening to, you know, maybe take funds from the Heritage Foundation. And then, okay, the turn here is that the New York Times and sort of the liberal establishment has.
I don't think his outfit is doing him any favors. There's something like the sleeves are like a little short with the dress shirt under the sweater. I don't know, man. I can't quite put my finger on it, but something's off.
Caught wind of this phenomenon in this wedge that now exists within the right to try to sort of further
sepia style filter. Is that what it is? Yeah, that's as he looks kind of sickly. He just looks kind of like skinny, like gaunt, like he just needs a few good meals or something. I don't want to sound gay and like harp on this guy's looks, but I'm just saying it's noteworthy because when he was doxxed by The Guardian like 2 or 3 years ago, the reaction was from the Bapsphere was like, what a Chad, what an absolute jacked, handsome man.
Blame these differences, not just of opinions, but sort of different ideological strains that Trump is holding together as a part of this coalition. And I do think there are real differences here and real.
Yeah, the outfit is, I don't know, man. Pick a sweater or a dress shirt. And the sleeves should be longer. Am I crazy? I don't know. This is one of these weird menswear fashion thing where people who know fashion would be like, no, it's supposed to look like that.
Sort of potential for this thing to fracture. So again, I don't want to be so dismissive as to say none of this matters. But what we've seen is the New York Times, people who don't like Trump, who've never liked Trump, who want to see the MAGA coalition fail, who want to see the return to a kind of centrist, sort of liberal conservatism. They want to use this as a wedge to break apart the MAGA coalition. And here we are trying to make some sense of this. Did I miss anything?
Yeah, I think the one thing that you missed is that like all great, highly intellectual debates in the United States, it really boils down to Hitler. And so like we have like,
okay, true.
Gone now, you're full Hitler in this debate. Like Hitler is like the great kind of central symbol of our times. And everything is reduced to this kind of surface level kind of morality where everyone accuses everyone else of being a Nazi. And Fuentes's appeal and Fuentes's rise to fame comes along with his oftentimes explicit endorsement of Hitler, of Nazism. And let's roll a clip to show people exactly what this looks like. And then
Hitler was a pedophile and kind of a pagan. It's like, well, he was also really cool. So, time to grow up. We're not children anymore. Am I right? Am I right? Am I right, boys? Am I right? Let's go. He was also really cool. And any boy knows that. Anybody who watches these videos where he's rolling down the street and stuff, it's like, this guy's awesome.
The line any boy knows that is so, because like, dude, we thought Hitler was cool in high school and we were like shit libs, you know what or whatever. Like we weren't. I remember me and my friend talking about Hitler all the time and stuff, and like how cool he, just like Nick said, like in the back of the car, like driving or whatever, like standing, waving at people. The guy just had something about him.
And so here's how I think about it, and here's how I try to maintain that kind of cold, calculating, strategic.
I thought Hitler was like evil and he massacred millions of Jews. Like I used to think that. Can you believe that? But I still thought he just obviously looks cool. And like he's obviously like a great leader. That's just like undeniable.
Of this phenomenon. What I don't want to do is take the bait and react emotionally. And what I think a better frame of reference is to look at it as far as actions, outcomes, interests. And so you can see why the left is interested in this clip or this kind of general phenomenon, because the left has been trying to turn, the conservatives into Nazis and Trump into Hitler for 10 years now. That's been like the dominant rhetorical arc that they've been trying to build. They failed to do it in Trump's first term. They've failed to do it in this recent re-election campaign. And just as that kind of great liberal hope of establishing the narrative has fizzled out, they get someone who's willing to say, to kind of break the taboo and openly say, look at Hitler. Hitler is great. Hitler is so cool. And so the establishment left press, the New York Times, finally got their Nazi. And of course, this is in Fuentes' interest because these.
And I talked about that even like during the Vosh debate, because the whole thing with the Parkland shooter kid, Cruz or whatever it was, he had like drawn swastikas on his gun. I said, like, all kids like drawing swastikas. They're just like cool and fun to draw. When I was in grade 3, my teacher in French class was teaching us about Japan. This is grade 3. And she was like, and when the teacher comes in, everybody bows. All the students. So, and then she's like, okay, so we're going to try it. So she's like, I'm going to leave the class. And my buddy was like, behind me, he goes, let's throw up a Sig Hail instead of bowing. And we did it. And she lost it. So she comes in, gets to the front, and everybody's supposed to bow. And me and my buddy throw up a couple Romans. And she didn't think it was funny at all. That was in grade 3. What age is that? Like 9 or something?
Clips become highly viral, right? They're scandalous, they're salacious, they're shocking, they're kind of digestible as sound bites. They circulate through television, through podcasts, other digital platforms. But what the right has done now is also buy into this. You have Ted Cruz saying, look at this complete Nazi. You have conservative think tank staffers saying Nazis are bad, and look, on one level, that's obviously true, right? Historical Nazism was awful. It was monstrous. It was a disaster. But they're falling for, what postmodern theorists called hyper-reality. There's reality, the world as it is, social connections, material connections, kind of really meaningful things in the world.
Dude.
Then there's hyper-reality. These are simulations or digital representations or...
These like try-hard intellectual podcasts are so fucking boring, man. They've been going for almost 8 minutes, and I haven't heard them say anything that is anything yet.
Zeros and ones that simulate some past reality, but they don't actually have the embodied force or kind of real social or historical weight of those past events. And so I like to say that, Nick Fuentes is not a Nazi, because the Nazis, Germany was denazified in the 1940s, and besides pockets of, skinheads or neo-Nazis in Europe and elsewhere, Nazism is a long dead ideology. And instead, he's using the symbols of Nazism to drive controversy and then to increase his kind of attention and notoriety, to play the villain in the left, to play the spoiler on the right. And if you take that framework, you say, this is like Nazism in a hyper-real sense only. We're not going to react emotionally or hysterically to it. And then you analyze the actual outcomes. Say, well, he tried to spoil Trump. It didn't work. There aren't actually Groyper voters out there. It's a digital phenomenon. And then if you look at, what he's doing on the right practically, pragmatically, he's signaling against Trump, signaling against Vance, splitting the conservative coalition. You can kind of generate your opinion about it, just setting like the moral hysteria aside, setting the kind of moral questions aside altogether for now. They're important, but I think they're easily kind of manipulated. You simply have to say, when Fuentes' notoriety rises, the right's power, coherence, and political fortune declines, and so adjust accordingly.
Yeah, you spelled this out in this essay you just wrote for.
All right, let's see what Kieperman says here.
City Journal, which I had a chance to read. And I think the thesis is basically right. I'm not going to quibble like too much on the margins. I think, just even like showing that clip or like talking about Hitler, like using that language is already losing the fight. It's already like capitulating that this is like commentary worth engaging in. I think most young people see that clip of him and they just laugh. That's it. It's just this kind of like mild amusement. And okay, fine. That's totally fine. Like that's like, okay. I want to like, all right, let me, because we talk about what are the policy implications of any of this? Like, how does this cash out into politics? What are the consequences, as you say? Even on...
So Rufo's argument is that, right, that Nick is like bad for the right because he doesn't like Trump, which is not really engaging in any meaningful way with Nick's argument, which is that Trump's not right enough, which is, by the way, this is why we criticized Nick for his comments a week ago. And we said Nick's comments are too centrist. And then it's all of a sudden it's like, oh, you got to have blind loyalty is what the Groypers say. It's funny, the similarities between Nick trying to pull Trump right and now the Wignats trying to pull Nick Nick right, rather, if you will. And the counter arguments are almost the exact same, which is like, how could you do that at a time like this? We need to all stick together. We need to be unified. We need loyalty and all of that. I'm super glad Trump won the election. Don't get me wrong. And I said people should vote for Trump if you can vote. We'd be so much worse off if Kamala won. It wouldn't even be funny. But I kind of get Nick's thing of like, you can't just give blind loyalty to people who don't give you what you want.
Like, if you take this core position, and I don't want to dismiss that there's nothing going on. It's not just sort of randomized sort of politics. There is a core to this, and it's a mistake to avoid what the core issue is.
Right. So now I think he's maybe making a good point here, which is like, you can't just say Nick is against Trump, therefore Nick is bad for the right or whatever, just because like he doesn't support the candidates that are generally supported. That's not really contending with what the problems are for him and his base, right? Whether or not pragmatically it's bad for Trump, that's not an argument. You know what I mean? You got to show that Trump is actually good. And in a Trump Kamala dichotomy, that's not hard. But Nick's whole thing is like, well, we want something better.
And of course, it revolves around Israel. It revolves around this kind of like relationship with Israel that the United States has vis-a-vis foreign policy, vis-a-vis a kind of moral commitment and diplomatic commitment to this country. You know, this quote unquote special relationship. What is the basis of that special relationship? Can we actually talk about it? And when you actually, what's interesting, like when you listen to Fuentes, for example, I saw this clip going around where he was talking about how actually he sort of supports the U.S. giving money to Israel. So even on like the central question, should we be funding Israel? He sort of came around to this position that yes, we should, because that's the only way to control Israel. And this was based on some tablet article that Jacob Siegel had written. And there are like Israel boosters who want.
It's so crazy. There was a L0m3z tweet I saw today. I didn't pull it up to talk about it, but she was saying we need to stop giving money to Israel because that's the only way Israel can be free to do what they want, which is like, I guess, kill the Ayatollah or something.
A withdrawal of sort of explicit diplomatic and materiel support so that Israel has more freedom to do what they want with their neighbors. And so it's like, well, maybe we actually do want to sort of like maintain some control, which demonstrates a sort of like nimble thinking and gets to the heart of this, which is actually sort of complicated. But the operating question is, we need to ask first, what is in America's interest here? And like when we're talking about Israel, it needs to be treated. There is no, in response to this whole like episode, I saw this yesterday. Some task force that the Heritage put together this statement, sort of making this, in my view, this very sort of like histrionic demand of what the Heritage Foundation needs to do in response to this controversy. And embedded in that demand is this sentence to preserve the role of Israel and its special biblical and political arrangement with the United States. And I think that's wrong, okay? Like, I do think that's a mistake to think that Israel has some special role. Israel ought to be...
See why I can't hate this guy? He's hardly the most radical. He doesn't talk about race. In a lot of ways, that's my litmus test for everybody is like, are you hardcore race pilled? Because that's just like the only thing that really matters that much. At least he's saying this, like the stuff that he does say, I find it very hard to disagree with. He's like, no, actually, we don't owe anything to Israel.
Be treated like any other country. It ought to be treated like Paraguay or like Slovenia or Singapore, which is to say that our interests come first. When we are evaluating how we want to interact with Israel, that is the only thing that matters. And so what this, and we can like have that debate. Maybe it does make sense, for example, to give them money. Maybe it doesn't. I think this administration is sort of like walking a fine line, has done a pretty good job. And I certainly think like the Israel lobby, maybe they got 80% of what they wanted out of this. That's good enough. And they should be happy with that. But I think we need to actually address like what it is that is at the core of this and what, Fuentes' followers, the people who listen to these clips, they see a old foreign policy establishment that seems to have a special interest with Israel. They see things like these anti-Semitic hate laws, these special carve-outs. They've been told for a long time that Israel is our greatest ally. This has kind of just been a default view. And they want that to be addressed. And I think we would be mistaken to just dismiss this whole thing purely as spectacle without sort of taking some of those concerns seriously.
That was boring. I'm going full-blown Wignat, man. I just don't even care about Israel that much. I already apologized to Patrick Casey for like shitting on his take. But now when I hear this, when I hear the whole like we gotta do Israel and this, all I'm hearing is like we need to like align ourselves with gay race communists who don't like Israel. And I'm just like, actually, the only thing I want to hear about anymore is making America demographically white again. That's like all I care about.